Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to June on the Range. And this is my third video this week for week 2. It's a month-long celebration of Westerns, and to read Westerns, either reread or read new ones, and for those who may never have read Westerns before. I have read a number of Westerns in the past, and when it's the brainchild of Michael K. Vaughan. And when he first even posed the thought of this, and I go, I'm there. I want to be part of this. Because immediately I thought of the Clifford Simak Westerns that he wrote. Clifford Simak, obviously a science fiction writer for the most part, but he wrote some Westerns as well. And I wanted to, read these, and I thought, oh, this is a perfect excuse to do this, and then I can do a bunch of book to films, westerns that I've wanted to do as well. So everything's worked out, and I'll leave everybody else's details, Michael's details, as well as the other hosts for this, because they're all reading. There's a bit of overlap with a few things. But there's some fabulous videos there, so do check everybody else out. But yeah, this week or this time was a little shorter of a shorter story by Clifford Simak called "Good Nesters Are Dead Nesters," again with the exclamation mark, very dramatic. And that was published in, I guess it's 44 caliber Western magazine. I'm assuming that's how you would say it. It's .44. Western magazine, so I'm assuming that's what it means. And that was he probably got about $177 for it. It looks like, and what in July 1945, this was published, and it was the longest story in that issue. Even though this is shorter than the other ones that we have read previously. And it's about a lawyer. It's a frontier lawyer. And, nesters. First of all, nesters. What are nesters? They are, like other terms that they would use for this is sodbusters. It's farmers. It's a derogatory term that was used by open ranchers on the open range for farmers that would come in and homestead and have smaller patches of land that was legally by the government, but at some point the government came along and said, first of all, yeah, these open ranchers, they had these huge pieces of land, and then all of a sudden, they're saying, well, no, you don't really own it. So now they're giving the land to homesteaders, the sodbusters, the nesters. And if they fulfill the homesteading things, they get to keep the land. So a lot of times there's there's the range wars in the United States. I think that was in Wyoming, the big one. But there was lots of disgruntled open range cattle people that they would hold the water and they would try to push them out. So a lot of these stories so far that Simak's done that I've been reading have to deal with this. It's somebody trying to push them out. It's usually someone in the town, but this time it's and it's a little bit of twist on this one, because you got the big range ones that the main character, who's a lawyer again with guns. He comes on to that somebody had been killed, like one of the nesters, one of the farmers had been killed, and it's somebody that has one of the big ranches that works for them, or at least he thinks it is. But we find out through the thing, most of his assumptions are wrong all the time. But he he swears out a warrant for this, and he wants to for the guy, and he wants to do this peaceably because he knows it can erupt into a war, and he doesn't want this to happen. But nobody wants to talk, and they just want action. So very quickly, things heat up, and and there are raids on other farms, and even the guy he thought that was actually behind it all, the rancher, had his place burned down, and he's sort of gone. And they know that out on the range that there's fighting going on everywhere, and he's sort of partial to his daughter, obviously. Um, uh, Again, there's a Crane is his name. I had just looked here. Yeah, it's Crane is the lawyer, but he's sort of sweet on this open range guy, the large um, ranch guy's daughter. So um, he takes her. He goes out and sees the place just completely destroyed. So he takes her to somewhere else he knows is nearby, another ranch, small farmer, a nester, and but he finds out that it's a little twist on things. It's not the big ranch owner that's behind all this. It's this little guy, or he seemed to be a little guy, a farmer, and he's just loaned money to everyone and the big rancher, and is just making sure that they can't pay the mortgages, and so he's pushed it to this limit, to so he can take over everything. And so Crane stops that from happening, obviously, at the end. So there's a bit of a twist. It's not the big ranch guy that's doing it. It's somebody a bit smaller. And the other thing that I found interesting with here was there was a Chinese character, Chinese cook. Stereotypical job, but that's there were a lot of that happening in that time, and it's interesting. He has he doesn't have the stereotypical derogatory uh, uh, dialogue for the Chinese cook either. The Chinese cook actually turns out to be saving the day in a sense. He goes to get help, and he does he evades, and he actually helps. He's got a little it looks like, it's by sounds of it, it's like a little derringer that he helps save the daughter of the rancher and save Crane. But there is derogatory mention of this Chinese person by the others, so then they use derogatory names for him. So which is it's all fine with the story, but the narrator, obviously Simak, was not going there with that kind of thing. But yeah, it's I found it's a very enjoyable story. But again, it's your typical thing. There's shootouts and a little bit of fighting, so everything is that way. But there's some interesting bits here in the introduction, because these books that are the complete short fiction of Clifford Simak are edited by Dave W. Wixon, who is the executor of the Clifford Simak estate. And he has spent a long time getting all the rights back for all these stories, and has been publishing these in, so far there's 12 volumes, but he names in the introductions that there's going to be 14, and he actually has the name still for the last two, because there's 12, so there's 13 and 14. So fingers crossed that's going to happen before about this time or a little later next year, when I start my huge reread of Clifford Simak, because I'd like to have those, because I want to read them in chronological order, and they're not in chronological order in these books. There are 14 known westerns. I've mentioned that before. So he's seeded them in 14 of the volumes. So there's 2 which I won't be able to read, because I don't have them, and I can't find them. But he talks about his writing process for the westerns and stuff. And there was a bibliographer, and I'm not sure. I think it might be Muriel R. Becker that he's referring to here, but he doesn't refer to her by name because it's the only bibliography that there is. that was published, I think, in 1980 by G.K. Hall. But she does have an interview with him, and he says about the Westerns that how he found it at the time. He says they all had cowboys as heroes, and I thought there were other people out west than cowboys and Indians. So I wrote about doctors and lawyers and other folks. But I stopped writing Westerns after a year. I had things to say that could not be expressed within the formula of the Western. He wrote a little more than a year's worth. Dave Wixon is saying, well, this is like 30, 40, 30 some years after the fact that he's probably, hazy in memory. So because in his journals, there's dates, so he clearly was writing. And he wrote before these as well. There's evidence for possible 21 Westerns that Clifford Simak wrote. Now, Dave Wixon hasn't been able to find these. He says there's the information on Western magazines are difficult. It's sparse. I have not looked into it myself. I would have thought somebody would have had an index, but I'm assuming there's not, because he would have found it and looked at it, because there are perfect indexes for science fiction magazines, like everything you want. Like, they've been indexed many times. All even short-lived one issue magazines of science fiction have been done. So you'd think for Westerns, but Westerns now aren't as popular, and they've been dwindling, so maybe not, and these are pulps. They're falling apart, like if you look for titles of these, I find a few, like, knowing the dates that stuff is in, and you can find a few for sale, but they're in really rough shape and they're very expensive. It would be nice to have them, but they're just they're just poor condition. He sort of says that, the way he was writing for Strictly for Money, that he would said, and then he's like, this was mentioned at some time, then I simply spent the weekend reading them. Monday morning I began writing. And it's like, he said when he wrote for Money, but I think there's a little more to that, because he was writing in his notes. There's evidence of writing Westerns in, like, the early 30s. Like, he goes on with 6 other titles here. One Shot Plays Rustler, 1933. Gold Vengeance, 1934. Some Cats at a Rocking Chair, 1943. Powder Smoke Payoff in Purgatory Canyon, 1944. Gringo Guns Spell Trouble, 1944. Busted Banks Playoff in Bullets, 1944. And A Tramp Trumps a Tenderfoot, 1945. And those are possible other titles. But the thing is, most of the titles that he wrote in his journals, saying that he wrote and he got some money for, or that he wrote and sent in, and he'll say where he sent it, but that's not usually where the titles that they were published under. But then he gets payment for something, and so Dave Wixon is, comparing and going, well, that's the time, so that must be the title that he sent in. That's the original title. So these other titles, these 6 other titles, may not be stories that were published under those titles. So there could be other stories out there, and unless they changed and they gave him a pseudonym, Simak never really used pseudonyms. As far, he said he's never used a pseudonym. He always used his real name for his journalistic work and his fiction. So, So there we go. That's day 3, and another story that I enjoyed. They are formulaic. They're not anything special so far, but I do like little nuances that I can see Simak style coming through, which is very interesting. Like these little things, which are very pleasurable to see. So next week I'll be doing another 3. We've got 6 more to do, so 2 more weeks, and yeah, and that will be the 12 westerns of Simak that I can do. Anyway, take care, BookTube.